Something happened recently that really caught me by surprise. It wasn't the repainted AM144 being transferred back up the main trunk, since that transfer hasn't happened yet, but I hope to catch it when it does. Nor was it an invitation to fly to Los Angeles and film the Metrolink trains with Toni Basil, as much as I'd love to meet her someday. What actually happened was me being unexpectedly contacted by Kris Wilson of Caledonia Works, who kindly blessed me with all of the add-ons from CW's websites that I didn't already own, of which there were 70. Initially, I was at a complete loss for words, but now I think I've collected myself to the point where I can say to Kris that I can't thank you enough for your generosity. Come to think of it, this reminds me of the connection I've made with my local heritage railway, who blessed me with an honorary lifetime membership because of all the videos I've made about their line. Who knew that simply turning up to ride or film the trains could get you so far? Although I have a small circle of friends in the railfan and TS communities, for which I am grateful, I tended to keep to myself most of the time, and I've always thought of myself as just a random nobody from a small country at the bottom of the world who just likes to talk about random locomotives, despite being aware of the fact that my channel has now done well enough to the point where multiple developers know about me. Thinking back to what I was saying about feeling like a nobody, I am reminded of Toni Basil having a song by the title of Nobody. It's on her 1981 album Word of Mouth, which also features her signature song Mickey, but I don't think Nobody is about the same kind of situation in which I see myself. In any case, the sheer amount of add-ons with which I've been gifted is difficult to comprehend, to the point where most of them go over my head, without referencing Toni Basil again. As for why I've included a Class 86 in this video, that is a reference to the music video for Over My Head, which features stock footage of a Class 86. As an aside, if you want a good pick-me-up song, I recommend listening to Toni's Go For The Burn, and the extended mix of Do You Wanna Dance. The former has a distinctively bouncy drum track along with catchy synth lines and guitar work, while the latter is very fast-paced, complete with an energetic chorus, a stomping drum track, and roaring guitars. In the end, I decided to make a 3-in-1 showcase video, with the chosen subjects being the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Class 23, Great Central Railway 9N Class, and Caledonian Railway 55 Class. Also, before I go any further, I feel obliged to make a certain reference. You'd ever dare! I would then. I chose the Class 23 because I've seen the preserved example, LMS number 11456, in real life, initially at the West Somerset Railway on the 26th of April, then a second time at the West Somerset Railway on the 3rd of May, when she was in a top and a tail formation with Fenchurch the Terrier. As for the 9N, she was chosen because she reminds me of another Great Central locomotive that I saw at Barrow Hill. This is 11F Class 440 number 506, Butler Henderson. I was originally going to look at the London and South Western Railway N15 class for this video, but I really struggled to wrap my head around the sheer amount of variation included in that pack, such as the nature of a class with such a complicated build history. I chose the Caledonian Railway 55 class as an alternative to the N15. The Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Class 23s are interesting little things, because they did not start life as tank engines. They were originally designed by William Barton Wright as 060 tender engines, and built at Horwich Works between 1876 and 1887. Their original designation was Class 25, but due to an increased demand for shunting locomotives, 230 examples of the class were rebuilt as saddle tanks between 1891 and 1900. In their rebuilt condition, the engines were used on shunting or short-distance freight work throughout the L&YR's network, and enjoyed long service lives to boot. The first example was withdrawn in 1926, 3 years after the L&YR became part of the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, and 96 was still on the books when the LMS became part of British Railways in 1948. The final survivor was withdrawn from service in 1964, but fortunately, one of her classmates has been preserved. In 1937, LMS number 11456, formerly L&YR number 752, was sold into industrial service, initially working at a colliery in Lancashire until 1947, when her owners became part of the National Coal Board. 20 years later, she would be purchased for preservation, with restoration being carried out by a group that's now known as the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway Trust. 11456's first run as a preserved locomotive took place in 1972 at the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, but these days her home base is the East Lancashire Railway. CW released the Class 23 as a TS add-on in July 2021. The pack is available for £15 at full price, and it includes a set of liveries ranging from the original L&YR days through to preservation. The selection is as follows: L&YR Goods Black, with 2 different types of builder's plate, LMS pre-1927 Black, LMS post-1927 Black, 11456 in her National Coal Board condition, BR Transitional Black, BR Plain Black with either the early emblem or late crest, and a couple of preservation variants, although the BR number is fictional in this case. Personally, I think the strangest livery in this pack is 11456 in her NCB condition, where the saddle tank is painted green for some reason. This is giving me Patchwork Hero vibes, and if you know, you know. Thinking back to the preservation variants, these are equipped with a range of headboards modelled by PVRS Productions. Heritage lines aside, I'm not aware of any routes that would be suitable for the Class 23, but I am aware of some Lancashire and Yorkshire stock that's available for the game. There's the Matrix Trains L&YR coaches and an L&YR wagon pack. The wagons and 2 of the coach packs, specifically packs 3 and 4, are available from CW's website, while packs 1 and 2 for the coaches are available from Steam Sound Supreme. Personally, I prefer how these coaches look in their original L&YR livery. One thing I noticed when I tried driving the Class 23 was that, even when I keep the coal and water at the right levels, as advised in the manual, the engine struggles to maintain or build up steam regardless of where I've got the regulator and reverser set. To be fair, she doesn't bleed boiler pressure as much as the Caledonian Railway 956 class, and I realised that I wasn't using the Class 23 for the right sort of work. I suspect she would steam a little better if shunting was all that she was doing. The Great Central Railway 9N was a class of 462 Pacific tank engines designed by John Robinson, and intended to haul suburban passenger trains out of London Marylebone. Initially, 21 engines were built by the GCR themselves at Caledonia Works. Another 10 were ordered by the GCR, but not completed until after they had become part of the London and North Eastern Railway in 1923. Before I go any further, I must make note of the locomotive's rather unusual coal bunker. The 9Ns, later redesignated as the L&YR A5 class, were successful on the London suburban trains. One more batch of the class, comprising 13 locomotives, was built in 1924 and 1926, albeit with some modifications in order to fit the standard L&YR loading gauge, as these engines were intended for use in the Darlington area. The original 9Ns built in GCR days had round cutouts on the cab sides, while the fourth batch, those are the ones built at Gorton under the L&YR, had proper cab side windows. Numbering for the 9N/A5 class was quite confusing, especially where locomotives of the original 1911 batch were concerned, for they were numbered 165 through 170, then 23, 24, 447 and 448. They had 5,000 added to their numbers upon the grouping in 1923, while the engines built under Hawthorne-Leslie in 1925 and 1926 were given 1700 series numbers. I didn't realise this at first, but it appears that this pack doesn't include the Hawthorne-Leslie locomotives, which had left-hand drive, cut-down boiler fittings and other modifications. Upon nationalisation, the A5s were divided into two subclasses, with the original Gorton-built engines becoming A5/1 and the later Hawthorne-Leslie engines becoming A5/2. The whole class had 60,000 added to their numbers upon nationalisation. All but one of the A5s survived into British Railways ownership, the sole exception being 5447, formerly GCR number 447, who was withdrawn in 1942 due to her frames being badly cracked. The rest of the class remained intact until 1957, when withdrawals resumed with 69815 and 69833, and the final examples bowed out in 1960. Sadly, none of the 9N/A5 locomotives have survived into preservation, but as for London Marylebone Station, the big tank engine's old stomping ground, it's still open today, with Chiltern Railways operating all services to and from the station. On the subject of Great Central steamers, one in particular that I'd like to see in TS, besides the previously shown 11F class, is the 8H class 084 tank of 1907. Those engines were specifically built for hump shunting at Wath Marshalling Yard on a branch of the Woodhead line, and remained in service until the 1950s. Sadly, none have survived into preservation. From what I gather, CW modelled the Great Central 9N for TS as a special commission. The add-on was released in August 2019, and it's still available for a full price of £15. One of the first things I noticed on this locomotive was her textures, which look distinctly different from CW products released in the 2020s. For comparison, here's an A5 alongside the P1 class 282, which was released for TS in January 2025. It's worth mentioning Epic Banastard's texture patch for the A5, which you can download from the Golden Age Developments website. The patch adds a colour correction and de-bluing. Both of them have something to do with Railworks Enhancer, so I've been told, although I don't use RWE myself. Much like the L&YR Class 23, the 9N includes a good selection of liveries, of which my favourite is the original GCR lime green. The full livery selection is as follows: Great Central Railway lined green, GCR lined black, two different takes on GCR to L&YR transitional green, L&YR apple green, L&YR lined black, L&YR wartime black, L&YR post-war black with unshaded decals and a new numbering sequence, L&YR transitional black with a British Railways number, BR Gill Sands early, BR Gill Sands late, and BR lined black with the early or late crest, and in clean or weathered states. Apart from the classic Woodhead line of 2012 and the rather low quality Netherfield Nottingham network of 2017, I can't think of any other Great Central area routes that are available for TS. I'm aware of an old Leicester to Loughborough route, but that's set in the preservation era. As for any GCR rolling stock, there's a wagon pack available on CW's website, while the Barnums are the only GCR coaches in TS of which I am aware. Of course, as someone who cares very little for historical accuracy when playing Train Simulator, I generally don't run the 9N with suitable rolling stock or on suitable routes anyway. After all, since there's a song out there about wanting to take a dog for a walk in space, that song being Spacewalkin' the Dog by Toni Basil, then I guess anything goes. Before moving on to the next segment, it's worth mentioning that the 9N is one of only two Great Central classes in CW's range, the other one being the 8K Class 280 tender engine, otherwise known as the L&YR 04 class, or as the basis for the ROD 280. Kris initially started out by focusing solely on Caledonian Railway locomotives, and although he has branched out to represent several other companies, from the pre-grouping, Big Four and, in one case, BR Standard range, he returned to his Cali roots in March 2025 with the release of the 55 Class 460 tender engine. This pack is available for a full price of £17. The 55s were designed by John F. McIntosh and built at St. Rollock's Works between 1902 and 1905, with a total build-out of only 9 locomotives. I don't know about you, but personally, I think the 55 class just looks like a small boiler version of the 903 class, another 460 designed by McIntosh, although these weren't built until after the 55s. The resemblance is so strong that I've started referring to the 55s as mini Cardines. The 903's smaller cousins had a noticeably short driving wheelbase and small tender. The latter was to make sure the engines could fit on a short turntable at Oban Shed, while the former made it easier for them to cope with the curvature of the Callendar and Oban line, a challenging route for which the 55s were primarily intended. These engines were sometimes referred to as Oban bogies, and survived into LMS ownership upon the grouping in 1923. Thinking back to the small tender for a moment, it reminds me of the Great Eastern Railway S69 class, which was later redesignated as B12 under the L&YR. When they became part of the LMS fleet, these engines were renumbered in the 14600 through 14608 range, with number 55 herself becoming LMS number 14600. Starting in the late 1920s, Oban bogies were displaced from their traditional stomping ground by ex-Highland Railway Clan Class 460s. Withdrawals began in February 1928, with LMS number 14602, formerly Cali number 57, being the first of her class to go. The final example was withdrawn in November 1937, and sadly, none of the 55 class have survived into preservation. CW's Cali 55 pack is not as comprehensive as the previously shown Great Central 9N, as it only includes 4 liveries, presumably because these were all that the mini Cardines ever carried. The included liveries are Caledonian Railway Dark Blue, Cali Light Blue, LMS Crimson Lake, and LMS Lined Black. I don't have a favourite out of that selection, since I like each of them just as much as the other 3. And there you have it, a showcase of 3 random steam locomotives from the Caledonia Works catalogue. Long-time customers can easily drive these engines straight away, as the controls are much the same across the range. But there's always a manual supplied with every add-on for those who might be less familiar with Kris's work. As for my favourite add-ons from his range, these are still the Northeastern Railway Raven A2, Great Western Railway Pacific No. 111 The Great Bear, Caledonian Railway 903 Class 460, and the L&YR Grizzly A4 and A3 Pacifics. Out of all the locomotives on CW's list of future DLC, 2 in particular that I'm excited for are the Victorian Railway's NA class from Australia and the Midland Railway Flatiron 064 tank. Once again, a massive thank you to Kris Wilson for blessing me with what is currently the full CW catalogue, especially at a time when my mental state still leaves a lot to be desired. If you haven't tried any of his DLC yet, you're missing out on some high quality locomotives that can work for people who prefer a more casual driving experience. I am one of those people. Until next time, I thank you all for watching, and if you stuck around to the end of the video, you win an animal that lives in the woods and has a thing for fancy cheese. It's the Camembert.